Namaskar, this is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Tonight we come to you with an exclusive interview. Just days before the G20 summit, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has spoken to Network 18 on the agenda, on the priorities and the vision for G20. We will bring you the highlights, as we also cover the key developments in the run-up to the big event. Will Joe Biden, the US president, still come? His wife has tested positive for the Wuhan virus. We'll tell you what the White House has said. Is China stealing advanced chip technology? A new Huawei phone comes with the latest chips, raising questions about how Beijing got them. Why is North Korean leader Kim Jong-un traveling to Russia? Why Pakistan claims to be getting $50 billion in investments? What's happening at Africa's first climate summit? Why Europe wants to hunt its wolves? And a special report on Teachers' Day. You don't want to miss this one. The headlines first. Will France withdraw its troops from Niger? The French army is holding talks with Niger's military. Around 1,500 French troops are deployed in the country. Ever since the July coup, anti-France sentiment has been on the rise in Niger. The coup ousted French ally President Mohamed Bazoum. Southeast Asian leaders meet in Indonesia for the ASEAN summit. Focus on Beijing's aggression in the South China Sea and the Myanmar crisis. The Philippines says it is ready to chair ASEAN in 2026 instead of Myanmar. Malaysia calls for strong action against the junta. Singapore sentences a rapper to 6 weeks in jail over racial comments. Subhash Nair is an outspoken musician of Indian descent. He was granted bail after being found guilty of promoting ill will between religious groups. Singapore has strict laws against sowing racial tension. Violators face up to 3 years in jail and hefty fines. There's a hole in the wall, but not just any wall. It's the Great Wall of China. Construction workers in Shaanxi province damage a part of it. 2 people have been detained for using an excavator to dig a hole in the Great Wall. The workers say they were trying to create a shortcut to reduce travel time. Spain fires its women's football team coach Jorge Vilda. This comes after the kiss controversy involving the federation president Luis Rubiales. Last year, 15 players had demanded that coach Vilda be sacked. Vilda is a close ally of Rubiales. And India announces its 15-member squad for the Cricket World Cup. Rohit Sharma will lead the team, KL Rahul, Suryakumar Yadav and Shardul Thakur included. But Sanju Samson has been left out. India is hosting the World Cup, which begins on the 5th of October. 4 days to go for the G20 summit. The world's most powerful leaders are coming to New Delhi, and the focus will be on India. As G20 president, what are India's priorities? What is India's agenda for the summit? Can it unite an increasingly polarized world? It won't be easy, but India is not shying away from this challenge. In an exclusive interview to Network 18, Prime Minister Modi has spelled out his priorities. He spoke to our sister publication Money Control, and he weighed in on a lot of issues, on India's priorities, on the issues that have caught his attention, and on how India will contribute to the G20. Tonight, we are bringing you the highlights of this exclusive. Let's start with the agenda. How does Prime Minister Modi define India's priorities? He's guided by an old but familiar motto: Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas, Sabka Prayas, which translates to everyone's support, everyone's development, everyone's faith and everyone's effort. This was his pitch for the 2019 election. This is what he promised the people of India when he ran for a second term in 2019. And the same idea has shaped India's G20 agenda. Let me quote from what Prime Minister Modi said. This is our guiding principle in global relations as well. When we laid out our agenda for the G20, it was welcomed universally, because everyone knew what we would bring, that we would bring our proactive and positive approach to help find solutions for global issues. How has the world responded to India's approach? Positively, according to the Prime Minister, and I'll quote again from the interview. When global leaders meet me, they're filled with a sense of optimism about India due to the efforts of 140 crore Indians across various sectors. They're also convinced that India has a lot to offer and must play a larger role in shaping the global future. These are Prime Minister Modi's words. What fuels this optimism? What captures the attention of world leaders when they see India? One of the standout stories is India's economic growth. India is the world's fastest growing major economy. It has beaten expectations, and how? Last week, we got some numbers. From April to June this year, the Indian economy grew at 7.8%. And these are fantastic numbers given the global environment. Most countries are reporting sluggish growth. India's pace has given more confidence to its policymakers. They can chase bigger goals on the world stage. And Prime Minister Modi highlighted this during the interview. Listen to what he said about the economy. India's growth is not only good for Indians, but also for the world. India's growth is clean and green growth. India's growth is being achieved with a human-centric approach that can be replicated in other countries too. India's growth helps further the interests of the global south. So India's growth trajectory serves as a model, a template for other developing nations to follow. The G20 helps India showcase its growth story. It also provides growth opportunities to other nations, especially in the global south. Again, this is a key priority for India, addressing the issues of the global south. Usually, this forum, the G20, like most international forums, is dominated by the concerns of wealthy nations. But India is taking a different approach. It is championing the cause of the global south. India has pushed for the induction of the African Union into the G20. India is also working closely with the G20 Troika. That's Indonesia, India, and Brazil. Indonesia hosted the summit last year, and Brazil will take over the presidency from India this year. So by working closely with these countries, India is trying to ensure continuity. Prime Minister Modi says, India is batting for the global south. And I'm quoting again, India has also been advancing the interests of the developing world, including the interests of nations not represented in the G20, such as the countries of the African Union. Further, perhaps for the first time in the history of G20, the Troika is with the developing world, Indonesia, India, and Brazil. This Troika can amplify the voice of the developing world at a crucial time when there are increased tensions due to global geopolitics. Expect all these issues to come up again when the G20 leaders meet over the weekend. With this interview, right before the meetings, Prime Minister Modi has set the tone for the G20 Leaders' Summit. But the guest list is still unsettled. Two big names have already dropped out: China's Xi Jinping and Russia's Vladimir Putin. Could Joe Biden be next? The US president is supposed to arrive 2 days early. So this Thursday, he's supposed to arrive on Thursday, but his travel plan is facing a last-minute hiccup. The First Lady, Jill Biden, has tested positive for the Wuhan virus. What about the president? His latest test results came back negative, but the White House says he will be tested at regular intervals. He will be monitored for symptoms. Now, as things stand, Biden will come to India. His latest schedule was released after Jill Biden's diagnosis, so the assumption is that he will travel. But what if he tests positive later today or tomorrow? What if he starts showing symptoms? Then things could get tricky. Biden last contracted the Wuhan virus in July 2022. He isolated himself inside the White House. All his work was carried out on Zoom. Will there be a repeat this time? We looked at the latest guidelines from the US Center for Disease Control. If you test positive, you must isolate for 5 days. That is the minimum. If you're sick and awaiting results, same thing, isolation. And if you're negative, well, then you're free to carry on without isolation. So Joe Biden needs a negative test result to board that flight to India. His other option is riskier. The president can choose to ignore the CDC rules. We should have an answer in the next 2 days, either way. But talk about bad luck. Biden has invested a lot in this visit to India. He wants to reach New Delhi in advance. He wants to hold talks with Prime Minister Modi. Some key issues are on the agenda, like the possible sale of mini nuclear reactors, drone deals, new visa rules, the war in Ukraine. There's a lot to talk about. So it's supposed to be a very important trip for him. Also Biden's first as the US president to India. It would be a shame if the Wuhan virus derails it. His absence would also be a setback to the G20 agenda. After all, this is a financial grouping. And the United States is the biggest economy of the world, also one of the biggest polluters in the world. So you need Joe Biden in New Delhi for key decisions on climate change, on debt relief, on supply chains, basically on most issues. But beyond policy, this is also about optics. It's about that moment when you take the family photo. Imagine a picture without Putin, Xi, and Biden. It's all that people will talk about, not the dozens of leaders who attended, but the big three who did not. Having said that, it is out of India's control. You cannot help it if Biden gets the Wuhan virus or if Xi Jinping puts petty politics over global good. All you can do is prepare. So let's check in on how New Delhi is getting ready for the big event. The final touches are being added. The entire city will soon turn into a fortress. The plan is to deploy 130,000 security personnel. This includes the Delhi Police, the Central Forces, and the National Security Guard. Snipers will also be posted atop buildings in central Delhi. It's like nothing that India has seen before. The last big diplomatic gathering was back in 1983. New Delhi hosted the 7th summit of NAM. That's the Non-Aligned Movement, NAM. Dozens of world leaders gathered in New Delhi that summer. But that was 1983. Today, the situation is much different. The technology is much more evolved. The security challenges are more dynamic. So the logistics will be a nightmare. And if you happen to live in Delhi, I have advice for you. Don't make weekend plans. Stay home. Road traffic and metro services will be regulated from Thursday night. Your delivery apps will also not work. So no Swiggy or Zomato. I know it sounds like a lot of trouble, but trust me, such summits are worth it because they bring international attention on the country, its people, its culture, and its progress. And India is trying to do the same. If you travel through Delhi, you can spot some new additions like murals and sculptures. All of them represent India's culture and achievements. Of course, they come at a cost. The government has not revealed the exact cost of hosting this summit, but most reports quote the same figure, around 1,000 crore rupees. That's $120 million. How much have other host nations spent on G20? Indonesia spent around $33 million for the Bali summit last year. New Delhi is spending 4 times that amount. But for India, this is not just a rotational presidency. It's about announcing its arrival on the world stage, about taking a place at the high table of diplomacy. So here's hoping that the summit outcomes can match the cost. Meanwhile, the US-China rivalry is getting more intense. They're locked in a Cold War, fighting on many fronts. One of the biggest flashpoints is chips or semiconductors. Chips are a strategic asset, the building blocks of modern technology. They power every gadget and device we use. And America controls the chip market. It controls the supply of the most advanced chips. China wants them, but the US has imposed supply restrictions. There are sweeping sanctions. China does not have access to chips or chip-making tools. So what does Beijing do? Circumvent the curbs. American sanctions are porous, and China is exploiting those loopholes. Case in point, Huawei. China's tech giant and a global leader in 5G technology, Huawei has defeated American sanctions, it seems. They've launched a new smartphone. It's called Mate 60 Pro. Now, some geeks decided to open it up. What they found inside was an advanced chip. It's been called a breakthrough. This chip supports the latest 5G technology. Its speed is on par with the latest iPhones. And remember, this is despite US restrictions. America has sanctioned Huawei. So China was not supposed to have this technology. How did they get it? This new chip is built by SMIC, the Semiconductor Manufacturing International Corporation. SMIC, it's a Chinese chip maker, partly funded by the government in Beijing. So Huawei's new phone runs on an SMIC chip. It has a name. Experts call this chip the new Kirin 9000S. It matches the speed of the new iPhones. And it's not easy to manufacture this chip. Making such an advanced chip is like creating a really tiny painting, like a microscopic masterpiece. The canvas is as small as your fingernail, and you have to fill it with 1 billion tiny paintings, so small that you cannot even see them. At the same time, the paintings have to be extremely detailed. This is how these advanced chips are made. There's a special process involved in it. It's called extreme ultraviolet lithography, or EUV for short, and you must know why this is so complicated. The canvas is the microchip. Instead of the paint, you're using light, and the drawings are transistors. What do the transistors do? They're like tiny switches. When you open a video on your computer or access an app on your phone, these tiny transistors work together to make that happen. So long story short, this process is both complex and precise. It's not an easy skill to master. Then how did China do it? How did they make their own advanced chip? Well, we don't have an answer, but we can tell you about some theories doing the rounds. Apparently, this chip was made using cutting-edge European techniques, meaning European tools were used. So did Europe supply this technology to China? Well, that is unlikely because the transfer of this technology is also restricted. Then how did Beijing get it? Two possibilities. Either China bought the tools before the restrictions came into force, or they stole it. And neither possibility can be ruled out. You see, before the sanction kicked in, China made large purchases of semiconductors, so Huawei could just be getting chips from an old stockpile. But recent reports also say that Huawei was trying to skirt Western sanctions. It is building a secret manufacturing network. Huawei has bought up chip-making plants. What they're really after is chip-making equipment. And all of this was done with utmost secrecy. Huawei is said to have hidden the fact that it owns these plants, apparently to evade Western sanctions. And the company is clearly getting help from Beijing, including but not limited to state funding. China is said to have given Huawei around $30 billion. What are the funds for? To expand chip production. For Beijing, this is top priority. They want to close the gap with America, and they're pumping in more money. China is set to launch a new state-backed investment fund. The plan is to raise $40 billion, 40 billion, and invest this money in chip making. Where will the money come from? The Chinese state will provide some 60 billion yuan. That's more than $8 billion. What about the rest? Well, we don't know yet, but we do know that Xi Jinping is very keen on the project. He wants self-reliance in technology. The Chinese president is making an aggressive push. In the past, he has pulled up Chinese companies. He said they were not making enough progress. Xi Jinping believes semiconductors are as important for the country as the heart is for the human body. Not making this up, I have a quote from the Chinese president. When your heart is not strong, no matter how big you are, you're not really strong. This is from 2018. This is what he said to some executives from a chip-making company. He wanted them to step up, to do more. And it seems he's got his wish. China is making rapid advances as America's policy of sanctions suffers yet another setback. And now let's talk about North Korea. Kim Jong-un is making moves, not launching missiles for a change. This time he's planning an overseas visit. And for the Hermit Kingdom, this is a big deal. They're cut off from the rest of the world. Their leader hardly travels. So where is he going? He's going to Russia. Russian President Vladimir Putin will host Kim Jong-un later this month. And this visit is a big win for Kim. Not only is he stepping out of isolation, he seems to have some negotiating power this time. Reports say Russia is looking to get some weapons, and North Korea could be the one supplying them. What kind of weapons? And what does Kim want in return? Our next report has all the details.
North Korea isn't used to getting a lot of attention, which is why its leader keeps firing rockets. But Kim Jong-un's fortunes might be changing. The war in Ukraine has given him an opening. Vladimir Putin wants to talk to Kim. He's rolling out the red carpet for him. The specifics are still being worked out. The visit could happen as soon as this month. Kim could pull out his armored train and travel to Vladivostok on Russia's Pacific coast. Putin is expected to meet him there. The Russian president is supposed to be in Vladivostok later this month. The city is hosting the Eastern Economic Forum. This is an annual affair. Russia hosts the event to promote investment in the Far East. The forum runs from the 10th to the 13th of September. It's a nice window for Putin and Kim to meet. Why is the Russian president making the outreach? He wants something from Kim: North Korean artillery shells and anti-tank missiles. Recently, Pyongyang welcomed a visitor from Russia, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu. Kim Jong-un gave him a tour. He was seen chaperoning the Russian Defense Minister and showing off the latest North Korean weapons, like this ballistic missile. The United Nations has banned them, but the Russians showed great interest. Reports say after that day, Putin and Kim have exchanged letters. The US thinks Moscow's partnership with Pyongyang is set to deepen, and the weapons trade will serve as the foundation of this relationship. Last month, the US warned North Korea.
So the broader issue here is Russia seeking out rogue regimes, to include Iran, attempting to try to obtain additional ammunition or weapons. And so again, we call on North Korea to not negotiate with Russia or provide any type of ammunition which could kill innocent civilians in Ukraine.
But neither side is paying heed to Washington's threat. Kim seems prepared to supply arms to Russia. In recent weeks, he has visited munition factories. Kim asked manufacturers to step up production. But his support won't come for free. The North Korean leader has two demands: support for his nuclear and missile programs, and economic support in the form of food supplies. But more importantly, it's the photo op that matters. A meeting with Putin helps Kim. He can use it to fuel a new narrative.
He wants to create an impression that he has Russian backing, which is partially true, but he wants to seriously emphasize it. He wants to get some military cooperation and assistance, maybe some sales of the North Korean weapons and ammunition.
While appearances do matter, it remains to be seen how much bargaining power Kim Jong-un really has. Last month, the Kremlin was asked about North Korea. Moscow revealed it wants to deepen ties, but it didn't say how far it's willing to go. Either way, Kim Jong-un's travel itinerary is bound to create fresh challenges for America.
Going to be renamed? There's a lot of buzz around this question. Many believe India could soon become Bharat. Why all of a sudden? Well, two reasons for that. Number one is this invitation. It is being sent out by President Draupadi Murmu. The invite is for the G20 dinner. Look at what it says below the national emblem: President of Bharat. It usually says President of the Republic of India, but this time it says Bharat. That's one reason for all the buzz. The second reason is the upcoming Parliament session. The government has called a special session from September 18 to 22nd. Reports say the name change could be on the agenda. Now, I know you have questions. How does a name change work? What would be the consequences? And why Bharat and not India? So let's try and answer them. First things first, what does the Constitution say? Article 1 begins with the following sentence: India, that is Bharat, is a union of states. I'll repeat that. India, that is Bharat, is a union of states. Doesn't that mean both names are interchangeable? The legal scholars are divided on this issue. Some of them point to other articles of the Constitution, like Article 77. It refers to the government of India and not Bharat. Also Article 52, which mentions the President of India and not Bharat. But some scholars disagree. They say Article 1 makes it clear that both names are the same, India and Bharat. What's written elsewhere does not matter. So which side is right? Well, that depends on what the government is trying to do. Are they making both names interchangeable, or are they abandoning India for Bharat? So far, there is no word, no clarity. The government has not confirmed anything about the name change. So it's all speculation at this point. Either way, a constitutional amendment will be necessary. You will have to add, remove, or tweak parts of Article 1. Now, let's assume that the government does that. Is the job done? Quite the opposite, really. The word India is part of so many institutions, laws, and positions, like the Supreme Court of India, the Chief Justice of India, the President of India. All of it may have to be changed. Every article of the Constitution mentioning India may have to be amended, and even then, there is a final test. Such a move will likely be challenged in the Supreme Court. In fact, it already has been. In 2020, the Supreme Court was hearing a petition. The petition wanted to drop India from the Constitution. And what did the court say? It dismissed the petition. It said, India is already called Bharat. So my point is simple. Even if the government wants it, it will not be easy. There are multiple political and legal challenges to renaming the country, which is why it's important to understand what this debate is about. Where does India come from? Where does Bharat come from? And how are they different? Well, Bharat dates back to Puranic literature. We have different versions of it, like Bharat or Bharatvarsh. Even the Hindu epic Mahabharat mentions it. Mahabharat. Bharat is defined as the land between the sea and the snowy mountains. Sort of fits India's geography, the Himalayas in the north, the Indian Ocean in the south. There are also some legends associated with the name, like the King Bharat. He is said to have been an ancestor of the Pandavas. The belief is all people in the subcontinent descended from him. So the land he ruled became Bharat. And where did India come from? The origin of India is from Sindhu. It is Sanskrit for the river Indus. But getting there took a long time. The Persians modified Sindhu to Hindu. The Greeks borrowed it from the Persians and they modified Hind and Hindu to Indus. So by the 3rd century, the land south of Indus, the land south of the river Indus became India. But did the locals use it? Well, not really. Under the Mughal rule, India was called Hindustan. That changed only from the late 18th century. The British began using India instead of Hindustan. We don't know why. Some historians say they liked the Greco-Roman roots. Then came 1947. India became an independent country. The makers of our constitution also debated the country's name. Some wanted Bharat instead of India. But in the end, all such proposals were voted down and the current one prevailed. India, that is Bharat. Today, there is also political context to this debate. In July this year, India's opposition parties announced a new coalition. A coalition called India. It's an acronym actually. Indian National Developmental Inclusive Alliance, INDIA. Around 26 opposition parties are part of it. All of them oppose the name change. They say it's about politics and not policy. But the government supporters disagree. They say it's about abandoning India's colonial roots. It's about reclaiming India's past. It's hard to say how this will play out. Even if India changes its name, it won't be alone. Many others have done the same. Turkey, for instance, is now Turkey. The Czech Republic is Czechia. Swaziland is Eswatini. Holland is now the Netherlands. Siam is now Thailand. Burma is Myanmar. Each country had its own reason for the name change. India's reason could determine the outcome of this endeavor. Over in Pakistan, the debate is more existential. It's about their economy. The caretaker prime minister has made a big claim. He says Saudi Arabia and the UAE are planning to invest in Pakistan. How much money? Around $25 billion each. So that's $50 billion. But that's not all. He says this investment will be made in the next 5 years. Impressive, right? Well, if it happens, yes. But not everyone is buying the prime minister's claim, and I'll tell you why. For starters, Saudi Arabia and the UAE have not confirmed it. And we are talking about $50 billion, so official confirmation helps. Secondly, Pakistan's track record does not inspire confidence. Let's face it, when you think foreign investment, Pakistan does not come to mind. It is politically unstable, it is home to multiple terror groups, and the human resource is not well utilized. The numbers reflect this. Since 1970, Pakistan has received foreign investment worth $60 billion. 60. That's $60 billion in 50 years. Now compare that with the new target, $50 billion in 5 years. So you understand why people are wary. Nonetheless, let's go by what the Prime Minister is saying. Where will this investment go? He mentioned a handful of sectors like mines, minerals, defense, and information technology. The timing of the claim is also important. Over the weekend, Pakistan's army chief met business leaders. He said something similar. General Asim Munir claimed that Pakistan will attract investments worth $100 billion. And now the Prime Minister has jumped on. Both their claims are very similar, but the question is, where is this confidence coming from? Apparently, natural resources. The Prime Minister says Pakistan is home to vast untapped resources. How much are they worth? According to him, $6 trillion. $6 trillion worth of natural resources in Pakistan. Islamabad is hoping that rich countries will invest and exploit these resources. Well, China has already pumped in billions, so their next hope is West Asia. Oil-rich kingdoms like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, they have helped Pakistan in the past. For instance, in July, Riyadh gave financial assistance worth $2 billion. But there's a difference. That was help. This is investment we are talking about. And when you invest, you expect some returns. You expect to make profits. And that's where Pakistan could have trouble. Now, imagine you're an investor. You're looking for places to invest. What will your wish list look like? I'm guessing somewhere politically stable, where electricity is cheap, where labor is skilled, and where infrastructure is top-notch. Does any of this remind you of Pakistan? Their traders organized a nationwide strike last week. Thousands of shops were shuttered. Angry mobs are protesting the rising inflation. Power bills have doubled in the last 3 months. Fuel prices have topped 300 Pakistani rupees. That's a record in the country's history. You can see the outrage in these pictures. People are burning tires on the streets, they're attacking power company workers, and chances are this crisis will only escalate. There is now talk of a water shortage in Karachi. The city's pumping station has run out of electricity. No electricity, no pumps, no water. The authorities are trying to fix this issue. But reports say at least parts of Karachi will experience water shortage, and that's a double whammy. No power, no water. And Karachi is supposed to be Pakistan's commercial capital. This city alone makes up 20% of Pakistan's GDP. They don't have water or power. And if this is the condition in Karachi, you can imagine the rest of Pakistan. So simply talking about billion-dollar investments is not enough. You need to lay a solid foundation. You need to invest in people and infrastructure. Only then will growth be sustainable. Also, Islamabad needs to ask itself one important question. Who is this growth for? For the people of Pakistan or for foreign powers? Because we've seen what happened with China. They brought their own workers to Pakistan. They exploited the natural resources of the country, and now there is resentment. Locals say the investment from China is not helping them. So headline announcements will not cut it. Pakistan's economic crisis is the symptom of a deeper problem. Petrodollars can hide it, but not solve it. To Africa now, where a historic climate summit is taking place in Kenya. Nairobi is hosting delegates from across the African continent. The goal is to decide on a way towards sustainable development. And this is the first such summit in Africa. It's a way for the continent to take charge, instead of always ending up the victims of extreme climate. But the way forward is not clear. Some countries want to bypass fossil fuel-led growth. They want to transition directly to green energy. Other nations, the ones who have massive fossil fuel deposits, do not want that, obviously. They want to exploit their natural resources to achieve economic prosperity. It's a tough debate, made tougher by protesters. People have taken to the streets of Nairobi. They demand an end to energy neo-colonialism. They say Africa's resources should be used to uplift the continent and not as a safety net for the polluting activities of the developing world. Here's a report.
In the fight against climate change, Africa has entered the arena. The Africa Climate Summit 2023 is taking place. It's being held in Kenya's capital, Nairobi. The city has become the stage for the climate battle. But as great as the summit is, it isn't without controversy. The participating nations have yet to agree on a way forward, and delegates from other parts of the world are pushing their own agenda, which has left many fearful for the path Africa will take. You see, the continent has been getting a raw deal. It's home to about 1.46 billion people. That's about 17% of the world's population. Yet it emits far fewer greenhouse gases than the developed world. The US and China are the biggest greenhouse gas emitters on the planet. They are the chief contributors to the climate crisis. And it's Africa that unfairly bears the brunt of extreme weather brought about by climate change.
This continent accounts for less than 4% of global emissions, yet it suffers some of the worst effects of rising global temperatures. Extreme heat, ferocious floods, and tens of thousands dead from devastating droughts.
The African continent isn't alone, of course. Many countries with negligible carbon footprints suffer the adverse effects of climate change. This is around the world. The collective global south pays for the sins of the developed world. But Africa is emerging as a solution. The continent has the potential to generate massive amounts of clean energy. Solar, wind, hydroelectric, everything is possible in Africa. And some African countries have been harnessing these green sources.
It is quite incredible, significant, that Kenya is now at about 91% renewable, and by 2025 anticipates being at about 95% renewable. And they're growing. So I think that it's clear that this will be a proving and a testing ground in these next few years for what's possible.
The summit host Kenya is at the forefront of renewable energy generation. And President William Ruto is championing green growth. He has a plan. Let Africa bypass the fossil fuel-based growth of the West. Instead, the continent should move directly to clean energy, develop that capacity, and then sell it to the rest of the world. Not just energy, but carbon credits.
The restoration and expansion of Africa's natural carbon sinks are not just an environmental imperative, in fact. They are an unparalleled economic goldmine.
Carbon credits are almost a transfer of responsibility. A polluting country can continue polluting if it buys carbon credits. It can pay green countries for their share of pollution capacity. This way, greenhouse gases don't really get reduced, they just don't increase. It's better than nothing, but not ideal. However, the system has the potential to enrich green countries, which is what Ruto wants to do. And there are backers for this. Yesterday, the UAE pledged to buy $450 million worth of carbon credits. Other nations like the UK and Germany are planning debt swaps and green projects. Here's what the EU said.
We're not only interested in extracting resources. We want to partner with you to create local value chains, to create good jobs here in Africa. We want to share European technology with you. We want to invest in skills for local workers. This is crucial for the young people.
Basically, they're trying to make Africa the green hub of the world, while they continue their polluting ways. On the other side of the debate are African countries with fossil fuel deposits of their own. Nigeria, Niger, Senegal all have oil. They want to use it to enrich their people, like some of the Arab states have managed to do. There are some African nations who have done this, like Gabon, which is both an oil exporter and a very green country. It has a massive amount of forest cover, a potential way to earn millions in carbon credits. But the recent coup there has shown that this wealth wasn't distributed among the people. Gabon's natural resources were exploited, but not everyone benefited. So some climate activists are against both the plans. They want green energy production, but only for Africa's benefit.
We are here to demand that Africa's energy system must be decolonized. It must be brought out from the hands of the corporates.
We want renewable energy now. We want sustainable energy in Africa now. Africa is capable of clean energy and driving sustainable change towards a better future.
The protesters want climate justice. They want climate neocolonization to end. They want Africa to benefit first from its resources. But in a world that has exploited Africa for centuries, will their voices be heard?
Now let's turn our attention to another theatre of colonization, the Pacific. Pacific Island nations are in the middle of a new battle, a battle for influence. On one side, you have the West, led by the big brother, America, and its deputy in the region, Australia. The West has long considered the Pacific its backyard. But of late, China has been trying to bring Pacific Island nations over to its side, trying to wean them away from the West using lavish gifts and insidious agreements. The gifts include your usual loans and infrastructure projects, but also unique offerings like a $74 million stadium. That's right, China has built and gifted a multi-million-dollar stadium to the Solomon Islands. These islands are located close to Australia. They're a nation of about 700,000 people and one of the poorer Pacific Island nations. They're set to host the Pacific Games this November. It's the first time the Solomon Islands are hosting the Games, and the stadium is apparently a gift from China. The plan was this. The Solomons would fund 20% of the infrastructure for the Games, and the remaining 80% would be funded by foreign sources. And most of this money came from China. We are talking about investment close to $119 million. That's what China has spent on the Pacific Games. Quite a generous gift, you would say. But China is not known for handing out free money. Countries in its debt like Sri Lanka and Pakistan can attest to that. Then what's the catch here? Beijing says there is no catch, that the stadium and other facilities were given with no strings attached, apart from the fact, of course, that they signed a shady deal, a security deal between China and the Solomons. It was signed last year. China will train the security forces of this island nations like their police force. And they were to be trained with replica guns sent by China. It sounds all kinds of shady and dubious. Why send replica guns? Turns out they were real after all, which marks another twist in this tale really. Is China secretly sending weapons to the Solomon Islands? A new report cites American diplomatic cables. They say these Chinese guns were not replicas. Last year, a shipment came from China. It bypassed the port authorities at Solomon Islands. The shipment was unloaded in the middle of the night with no proper documentation. And all this set off a political storm in the Solomons. That's when the government said that these were replica weapons. They produced replica weapons. They said all accusations were wrong. But the US does not buy this explanation. It believes that China has been sending genuine weapons with unique serial numbers. It's yet to be confirmed, but if it is, it will show China's ambitions. Sending weapons to the Solomons means a closer alignment. Also, a new weapons market for China, creating a dependency and moving in the West's traditional turf. The government in the Solomons denies all of it, of course, and it's not the only country caught in the turf war between China and the West. As you move south from the Solomons, you arrive at Vanuatu, a country of about 330,000 people. It is in danger of being swallowed by the ocean. It's at the forefront of climate change, also increasingly at the forefront of the China-West influence war. Last year, Vanuatu signed a security pact with Australia. It was negotiated by their Prime Minister. The man was ousted yesterday. He faced a no-confidence motion. He was ousted. He was accused of putting Vanuatu's neutrality at risk by signing the security pact with Australia. So he was removed even before the pact could be ratified by his country's parliament. Now a new man has taken charge. His name is Sato Kilman. He says the security deal will have to be revisited. And that's one of the first things that he said after taking office. The new Prime Minister has been accused of being pro-China. When asked about his stance, he said, "We are not pro-West, we are not pro-Chinese, we adopt a non-aligned policy," which is a noble sentiment, but can he really pull it off? The Pacific Island nations are in a unique position. They are being courted by rival powers. They could potentially play the West and China against each other to reap the benefits. But both factions have a history of exploitation. The West and its history of colonization, and China and its newfound love for debt-trap diplomacy. If the Pacific Island nations are not careful, all these pacts and gifts could turn into a trap. The gifted stadiums could end up becoming gilded cages. The European Union has declared war, and I know what you're thinking. No, it's not a war against Russia, not yet at least. What we're talking about tonight is a war on wolves. There are strictly protected species in the European Union, meaning you cannot capture or kill them. But now their number has exploded, and the return of the wolves poses a danger, especially to livestock and human life. So the European Commission wants to review their protection status, and championing this cause is the EU chief herself, Ursula von der Leyen. She is pushing for the change. Our next report tells you why.
It was the night of September 1st, 2022. A male wolf was prowling in Lower Saxony, a rural area in northwest Germany. The wolf used the darkness as its cover. It sneaked into a well-guarded compound and ended up killing a pony. But it turns out this wasn't just any other pony. It was 30-year-old Dolly, a pony that belonged to EU chief Ursula von der Leyen. The kill may have been random, but the fate of the wolf was sealed. It became enemy number one for the European Union. Officials issued kill orders. There was a bounty on its head. But all of that was in vain, because the wolf that killed von der Leyen's beloved pony was never caught. However, the EU chief seems to have not given up. One wolf may have evaded her, but Brussels now has its sight on all the wolves across the continent. Wolves roamed Europe long before humans, but they soon became extinct. That's due to rampant hunting. They were extinct in much of Western Europe. After having been systematically eradicated, the numbers have only gone up in the last decade. That's when wolves were designated as a protected species. It means you can't kill or hunt them. Europe currently has around 19,000 wolves, and in Germany, there are around 1,200 wolves. So the numbers have gone up, but not everyone is happy, like Ursula von der Leyen. She lost her beloved pony, just like other farmers who lose their livestock to wolves. Complaints have been growing. EU states have seen a dramatic increase in the number of livestock killed. In Austria, livestock killed by wolves increased by 230% in 2021. So now farmers want the right to shoot them, and the EU chief agrees. The European Commission now wants to review the protection status of wolves, but conservationists have slammed this move. They say the recovery of the wolf population has been slow, and it must be celebrated, not culled. So, what will it be for Europe? Will they declare a war on wolves? Or will they come to the howling consensus that coexistence is better than culling?
For our next story, let's stay with the wolves. The European Union may have declared war on them, but historically, humans have shared a deep relationship with these animals. This is especially true for Native Americans. According to lore, wolves were revered as wise beings. They were viewed as pathfinders, not just in the literal, but also the spiritual sense of the word. Wolves were given the status or stature of teachers. And that is curious. After all, isn't that what teachers really are? They are humanity's pathfinders. Teachers not only arm us with necessary skill sets, they also extend themselves beyond disciplinary boundaries. They have the power to build or destroy minds. And I'm talking about this tonight because today, India is celebrating Teachers' Day. It's an annual celebration to highlight the importance of teachers in our life and to recognize their contribution, which has existed since the beginning of education itself. In ancient Egypt and Mesopotamian civilizations, priests played the role of teachers. Students were often taught in temples. The methods were rigorous and discipline was harsh. In ancient China, teachers focused on morality in education. They trained students to develop moral sensitivity. In ancient India, gurukuls acted as the center of learning. Pupils resided in them till their education was complete. So education and life sort of became intertwined. It involved everything from prayer and worship to discussions on philosophy, morality, and the law. And this was thousands of years ago. Over time, education has evolved. It started with bamboo books and papyrus scrolls, then went from blackboards to smart boards in classrooms. During the pandemic, it shifted to Zoom classrooms. And now ABC has become GPT as AI is disrupting education. Bots are drawing up lesson plans for teachers and helping students with essays and maths problems. The role of teachers has also changed, from being sages on stages to facilitating learning, leaving us with one question: who is a teacher anymore? After all, anyone can learn new skills from YouTube videos or write a verse with a little help from ChatGPT. This affects how we look at our teachers too. Reports say teacher morale is at a low point today. It is fueled by low pay and lack of respect for what they do. Teachers rank 7th in the global poll on 14 respected professions, 7th. The world over, only 36% people believe that students respect their teachers. That's awfully low. In many countries, teachers are paid less than what they consider fair. Some of the worst paying countries are the Slovak Republic, the Czech Republic, and Poland. And this is so confusing, especially as historically speaking, teachers were put on pedestals. They play a crucial role in our lives. Good teaching has hardly been about simply imparting knowledge or information. It is both complex and elusive. Teachers can help students become the best versions of themselves. They elicit response, they challenge thinking, they even push us to think deeply. They can change our lives completely. In fact, let me ask you this. Has a teacher ever made a real difference in your life? Be it an educator or a mentor. A sea of faces is probably floating through your mind. That's because each teacher's unique personality, their eccentricities, their unnerving tactics are etched in our memory. Every one of them impacted us in some way. Historian Henry Adams once said, "A teacher affects eternity. He can never tell where his influence stops." And he was right. Research agrees with this. Having a good 4th grade teacher makes a student more likely to go to college. Having a good teacher means students grow up to earn more, about $25,000 more over a lifetime than they would otherwise. A great teacher for a single year between 4th and 8th grades means students earn more in their late 20s. Positive high school teachers can do wonders. When teachers have high expectations of their students, they produce more students completing college. Teachers across the world know the power they hold, and every day they show up, many in difficult situations. Like Indian teacher Ranjit Singh Disale. He teaches young girls belonging to a tribal community at a rundown building in a village in Maharashtra. Before him, attendance was as low as 2% in this village and teen marriage was rampant. But today, teen marriage is non-existent here and attendance stands at 100%. Another example is Kenyan science teacher Peter Tabichi. He gives away 80% of his income to help students at a poorly equipped school. These students could not otherwise afford uniforms and books. And these may be extraordinary stories, but every teacher plays a remarkable role. Our teachers make us who we are. And when we get lucky with a teacher, we get really lucky. So if you haven't already, make sure you call or message your teacher and thank them today. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Gender reveal parties are supposed to be a happy occasion, but this one in Mexico went horribly wrong. The plane releasing the pink smoke on the expectant couple crashed, killing the pilot. In Iraq, millions of Shiite Muslims gathered in the holy city of Karbala for the Shiite pilgrimage of Arba'in. And sometimes a lap can be really costly for an athlete. Like this athlete who got confused and went for an extra lap, missing his lead in the triathlon. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day, in 1972, the Summer Olympic Games in Munich took a tragic turn. Palestinian gunmen attacked the Israeli team and took them hostage. 11 people were killed after a botched rescue operation. The attack caused a deep rift between Germany and Israel. We're leaving you on that note. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.